Hey, this is Scott of photographybanzai.com. Today I'm talking about the Nikon D600. It is the lowest cost full frame camera to be released from Nikon, right from the get-go, 2000 or less for a full frame camera. It does come with a few negatives, has a 1/4000th of a second maximum shutter speed and a 1/200th of a second maximum flashing speed. That's of course in manual flash mode. You can also do FP sync if you have a flash that is capable of that, but it does have a little bit lower specs. However, it still holds some nice specifications. 5.5 frames a second, full frame images from that, which is nice and fast for this level of camera. Has a 100% viewfinder, which is also great for that. And build quality is very solid, but it is lower end than the D800 and above. Magnesium alloy on the top and the back, but the rest is plastic. In practice, you probably won't really notice too much of a difference. It does have weather resistance, which is nice, which is said to be of approximate level of the D800. It is a 24 megapixel full frame sensor from Sony. Very nice high dynamic range, very nice image quality in general from this sensor. 3.2-inch LCD screen, which is larger, or slightly larger than the APS-C cameras of a digital SLR size, which is a nice little addition there. Also has 2 SD card slots, which goes with the more consumer-oriented feel of the camera. I actually prefer the 2 SD card slots, which I'll get to in this review later on. It's rated at 150,000 shutter actuations, which is 50,000 less than the D800, but in practice you probably will replace the camera before you hit that wall, but there's nothing to say it won't go past 150,000. So in general, this is a somewhat high-end consumer camera with the large sensor and all the benefits that come with that. Nice large bright viewfinder. The camera itself is really not too much larger than D7000, which I prefer. I prefer the smaller cameras in that respect. And the layout itself is very similar to the D7000. A few changes from that though. There's a lock button on the top here for the mode dial, and a few different placements. They rearranged some buttons and added a few, like the video record button on the top here, which I'll get to in more detail close up a little bit. But overall, I'm really happy with this camera so far. Nice solid build quality, takes great photos. I personally haven't had any issues with dust and all of that have been mentioned on the internet forums, and just generally nice solid camera so far. I haven't really hit any walls with the slower maximum shutter speed and flashing speed, but it's just getting around little negatives, from the super high-end, more expensive cameras. Anyways, this is a great camera so far for me personally. I would suggest checking it out. As I mentioned, I'll go into more detail on the camera itself and go over all the buttons and some of the settings too. So here's the D600, a little bit more close-up detail. First off, the back of the camera has a removable screen protector, which is a nice addition. You don't have to worry about scratching your LCD. Now this is the layout that is similar to the D7000. You have the buttons on the side here and a few extra controls, the maid dial to control menu settings and such. The change that they did make down here, they flipped the plus minus, zoom in, zoom out, quality, ISO buttons from the D7000. I would have preferred some consistency. I don't know why they switched them, but this layout is slightly more convenient when they're flipped like that. But you can also see menu button and a few other ones like white balance and all that, quality. So you'd hold the quality button down and then cycle through with the dials. So see, it's switching from fine to normal to basic, Then the top one switches the size. Most of the controls work like that. Similar to ISO, you hold that down, and on the top here you can cycle auto ISO, or you can change the starting point. So they work relatively well that way. Some people prefer the more advanced Nikons. One difference with the higher level Nikons is this has the square viewfinder and the connector here. You can't use the more advanced add-ons and such that have the round of the D800 and D4 and all those cameras. I don't know, it might be a negative for you if you prefer that setup. So on the top here, main dial. Actually, like the U1, U2 user mode settings, they're very easy access and you can set up custom modes. For example, I use U1 for manual flash and U2 for a special aperture priority mode that I prefer to have it set up as. And it does have a button that you have to press down to switch. Otherwise it won't change, which is just a precautionary thing. Similar to this button here, you hold down and then you can cycle this. S is just single shot, and then you've got your continuous shooting modes, low and high speed, and then the quiet shutter mode. I'll show you that real quick if you're not familiar with the sound differences there. So first I'll put it into standard and then take a photo, and then I'll switch it to quiet. So I'm holding the button down and then I let go and then it finishes the actuation. Do that one more time. Standard. Then I switch it to quiet mode. And then I let go. It makes those two distinct noises. So it's a little better in situations you want to be a little bit less conspicuous. And then you've got mirror lockup and a few other ones. So that's pretty easy to use. You do not have the extra AF button here, but you can change the setting of this AEL button. I don't use that special autofocus mode that a lot of people do. I haven't really had a need to do that at this point. Over here you've got the locking of the focus point. I usually just have it on the center point. I use the recompose method where I focus with the center point and then change my framing from there. So I just have it locked down. And down here you've got two different settings. One is for video, one is for stills, and it's all related to live view. So I put the live view on. Right now it's in video. You've got the video ratio. You have audio levels, which is great. This camera, I'll get to it, has mic port and headphone jack, which is nice. So you can also switch to still frames, and then you've got the still frame ratio on the screen. You can't change your aperture when you're in live view. That's of course one of the big negatives of this camera, but not too much of a big deal for some people. I haven't really ran into too much of an issue just flipping live view off or on as needed. Up here, the Doppler for your viewfinder if you wear glasses, and the way that you do that, you make sure that the lines inside where you see the surrounding the autofocus points, make sure those are sharp with the Doppler when you've got your glasses on. Up top, of course, the main LCD for settings. If you're not looking in the viewfinder, has reasonably well. It has 1 and 2 for the card slots, and it shows all of what you basically need to know at the moment. Metering mode button. This is for video record. So if you're in live view, you could press that and it starts recording, and then this can just be used for autofocus, which is nice. Exposure compensation, of course, little button there. So you just hold it down and then cycle the back dial. This camera has the front and back dials, which is great for manual mode. You can control aperture and shutter speed at the same time, or whatever else you want. Info button, I don't use that often, but nice for maybe tripod use. What I like about this camera is that it has 2 SD card slots. I was using Pentax for a long time, only 1 card slot. Even more so, the more advanced Nikons and Canons, they don't use SD, but I have a large cache of SD cards, so I really prefer just SD cards. And they work well for me. They're small, they're fast enough, and the D600 is probably the best camera with the 2 SD card slots at the moment. See on the front here, of course, got a few extra buttons you can customize. If I can get them in focus. This one right here, and then down here. This is normally set to depth of field preview, so you can see the aperture change in the camera. It does have a built-in flash. It can pop up with this flash button here. This is a bracket button, so if you like doing bracketing or HDR photos, dedicated button for that. On the side here, your autofocus or focus controls, manual focus, autofocus switch, and then this button here you hold down just like any other button of this type. You hold it down, and then on the top you have a few different settings: autofocus, single, automatic, or continuous. And then up at the top you can change the focal points. This camera does have 39 autofocus points with 9 cross type. However, the negative of this specific camera is that it's using the focus system from the D7000 range, which means it's physically smaller. So your focus points will be physically smaller area with that full frame sensor. Autofocus assist lamp, very nice, works well. And there really isn't too much more to go about here. I should mention as I said previously, mic port and the headphone jack. I haven't actually used it yet, but that's a nice addition if you're really into video. Then you've got your standard USB, HDMI, and then down here you can add a wireless adapter, GPS, anything like that. Usability on the camera has been pretty solid for me. The one negative, I think, at least with my hand size, is that the grip here is somewhat short, especially compared to the more expensive Nikons D800 and such. So it's not terrible, but I would have preferred it to be a little taller on the grip. But I've gotten used to it and I don't really notice. When I first got the camera, it seemed like, oh, the grip is short, but now it's decent and I haven't really noticed any issues with that. So let's go into the menu a little bit. This is similar to most Nikon's advanced ones. Start off with My Menu, which is on the bottom here. And you can add things to here. I have currently ISO, sensitivity, ISO settings, and the AF Assist Illuminator, which I like to turn off quite often. So just have that here. The one nice thing about the My Menu is that your first setting here you could set to this button. So let's get out of the menu. I press the button, it jumps right to ISO settings. It's not perfect, but it's helpful in some situations. Let's go back to the menu again. Retouch menu, I personally don't use that often. I use RAW, or I shoot in RAW, so I don't really need to do anything here. Setup menu, lots of nice stuff here. Format, I usually format my memory cards before going out on a shoot. Just prefer it that way. Let's see. The mirror lockup function. Sometimes you might see this off. That means your battery is not charged enough to do the mirror lockup or to clean your sensor. So that setting, if it's grayed out, fully charge your battery and check it again. Took me a little bit of research to figure that out. Let's first go into shooting menu. So I really like the 2 card slots. Lots of great stuff you can do with that, especially with in regards to backing up your photos. What I do is I put JPEGs on the second card. I usually have a large card in the second, and I just leave that there, and then shoot RAW. Save those to the main card. Works really well to have at least some type of backup. Smaller JPEG, I mean, that's good enough. If in a pinch one of your RAW cards stopped working, you'll still have that JPEG, so that's nice. There is movie settings, so you can select. The D600 has a really large range of movie settings: 1080p 30 frames a second, and then 720p 60 frames a second, which is nice for higher action photo or videography. You can control microphone levels, so you can see right now it's just hearing my voice. That's pretty cool. And you can also define what card to put the videos on. And then we get into the custom settings menu. There's so much stuff here, it'd be a lot to go through, but needless to say, you can change a lot of the camera's settings and then assign it to one of these user settings, and then you've got a fully custom setup. And that's what I do with my 2 user settings on there.